They didn't even open the door all the way. Just a crack, wide enough for my son's face to appear, lit from behind by the warmth of their hallway light. "Mom, we're not ready yet. Just wait outside for a bit, all right?" His voice was flat, like he was asking me to hold a bag of groceries, not stand in the rain like a forgotten parcel. I was 78. Old enough to have earned the right never to be left waiting anywhere, especially not at the gate of a house I helped pay for. But there I stood, in a navy coat that had once been my best, now soaked through at the shoulders, water dripping from the brim of my hat. I didn't say a word. I just nodded like a fool and stepped back. Behind him, I caught a glimpse of balloons, paper hats, a cake box from the fancy bakery I knew cost more than my week's groceries. Children's voices echoed inside, including the little one whose birthday I was supposedly here to celebrate. But no one else came to the door. I waited. The rain didn't let up, and I didn't have the heart to walk away. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they'd open the door again in 5 minutes, laugh, and say, "Come in. What are we thinking, letting you stand out here like that?" But no one came back. The lights inside flickered. The shadows moved. I could smell roasted meat and melted candles. And I kept waiting. My fingers went numb first, then my toes. I looked down at the stone path, now slick and puddled, and thought about how many times I'd walked up that very walkway carrying gifts for their weddings, for their mortgage, for their emergencies, big and small. I remembered when Nathan was 7 and had broken his arm falling from a tree. He cried all night, and I sat with him on the hospital cot, humming softly while he slept. He'd said, "Don't leave me, Mom." And I didn't. Not for 30 years, I didn't. And now, this. I didn't knock again, didn't call, didn't text. Just stood there, shoulders hunched, hat dripping. I might have looked like some old beggar lost in a suburban street. I stood there for nearly 40 minutes before I turned away. No one came to fetch me. No one called out. I drove home in silence. My coat clung cold to my spine the whole way. The heater took too long to warm up, but I didn't mind. I needed to feel it. Needed to feel how far this had gone. That whatever lines had once connected us, mother to son, grandmother to grandchild, had thinned into something invisible. Or maybe they'd snapped altogether. When I pulled into my driveway, I didn't go inside right away. Just sat behind the wheel, watching the rain run down the windshield, and let it all sink in. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't one bad evening. It was the final scene in a play that had been dragging on for years. You don't just wake up one morning and realize your son sees you as a burden. It starts small. A forgotten birthday. A visit that keeps getting postponed. A thank you that never comes after a large check. And then, one day, you're outside in the rain and they ask you to wait, and it doesn't even occur to them that what they've done is cruel. That night, I took off my soaked clothes and stood in the kitchen in my slip, shivering not from the cold, but from the clarity. My house was quiet. Too quiet. My husband, Ed, had been gone 13 years, and no one filled the silence like he used to. I touched the side of the fridge where his photo was stuck with a magnet from Santa Fe. "You'd have told me to leave," I whispered. "You'd have told me this wasn't love." I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I made tea and opened my notebook. Then I started to write. Not a letter, not a journal, a list. And at the top of the page, I wrote one sentence, clear and underlined. "They left me in the rain. I will not forget." The kettle had gone cold by the time I remembered to pour the tea. I warmed it again, slower this time, as if the water would understand my mood and stay hot longer. The notebook lay open on the table. My handwriting was neat, but a little tighter than usual. That's how I knew I wasn't just upset. I was anchored, grounded, not angry, awake. By morning, the rain had stopped, but the sky was still the color of dishwater. My coat was draped over a chair, still damp at the cuffs. I stared at it for a long while, remembering how I'd bought it 15 years ago, thinking it made me look classy. That was the word Nathan used when I wore it to his engagement party. "You look classy, Ma." I'd held on to that for years, like it meant something. On the notebook page, under that first sentence, "They left me in the rain. I will not forget." I began listing things. Not everything, no. Just what I remembered offhand. $8,000. Roof repairs for their first house, $25,000. Down payment on the second house, the one with the porch light that never turned on last night, $12,000. Amber's emergency dental surgery, $3,600. New appliances when theirs broke down, $500 a month. For the past 5 years. Help with school fees and groceries. And that was just what I remembered without opening the file cabinet. I wasn't mad about the money. Not exactly. I'd given it freely. I had it, and they needed it, or said they did. What stung was the silence that followed each check. No gratitude, no warmth, no follow-up. As if, once the wire transfer hit, I'd served my purpose. At 9:17 a.m., my phone rang. Caller ID, Nathan. I let it buzz 3 times before answering. "Mom?" His voice was softer now, hesitant. Maybe he'd noticed my absence. Maybe he'd finally checked the messages from last night, none of which I'd sent. "Morning," I said evenly. "Hey, listen about yesterday." I waited. Let him squirm a little in the pause. "I'm really sorry you had to wait like that. Amber didn't realize you were already there. Things got busy." It was raining," I said, "for 40 minutes. I know, and I'm really sorry. We should have. Look, we feel terrible. Maybe we can come by later. Bring lunch?" I didn't answer right away. I could feel the thread again, thin as fishing line, stretching between us. I'd spent years holding it up from my side. "No," I said finally. "Don't come today. I'm a bit tired." Silence. Then, "Okay. Well, let us know if you need anything." I almost laughed. That phrase. "Let us know if you need anything." They'd said it at Ed's funeral too. No one ever meant it. After the call, I opened the filing cabinet and pulled out the thick folder labeled Household Nathan. There were receipts, emails, transfer confirmations, handwritten notes from when they used to ask in person. It wasn't the money that made the folder thick. It was the years. Every page was proof of my love and their growing absence. I flipped to the envelope at the back. Legal papers, deed of trust. Their house, the one they live in, I own 40% of it. We agreed on that when they needed help with the down payment. Never refinanced me out. Never paid me back. Never even offered. They'd stopped saying thank you sometime around 2013. That morning, I brewed fresh tea, pulled out a second notebook, and wrote only one word on the first page. Pause. Then I called my bank. A young man named Aaron answered. Pleasant voice. Probably younger than my grandson. "Mrs. Lindell, good morning. How can I assist you today?" "I'd like to pause all automatic payments associated with the Tremont account," I said. "And I'd like to schedule a meeting for this afternoon with someone in senior accounts." He paused, probably clicking through my file. "Of course. Would you like to tell me the reason?" "I'd like to review how my money's being used," I said. And who has access to it? Yes, ma'am, I can arrange that. And Aaron, I added, please make sure nothing is processed until I give written permission. He confirmed it politely, said he'd email me the meeting time, and that someone named Judith from Senior Accounts would be expecting me. I hung up and let the phone sit face down on the table. That same phone had rung at least 60 times in the last 5 years. Always when they needed something. Never just to ask how I was doing. Never just to say, "Come over, Mom. We miss you." I picked up the pen again and wrote a new line under the last one. They left me in the rain. Today, I close the umbrella. The banker's office smelled faintly of lavender. Artificial, but pleasant. Judith was in her early 50s, sharply dressed, with the calm, neutral tone of someone who's been trained to handle nerves and money without flinching. I liked her immediately. "I've reviewed your file, Mrs. Lindell," she said, gesturing for me to sit. "I see you've been very generous over the years." "Is that what the system calls it?" "Generous?" I asked, lowering myself into the leather chair. I would have gone with something closer to financially blind. Judith smiled, not unkindly. "Well, you're here now. That's what matters." We began going over the accounts. I had 5 in total, 2 savings, 1 checking, 1 investment portfolio, and the Tremont account, the one they all used. And by they, I meant my son Nathan, his wife Amber, and their older children, who had somehow been granted secondary card access over the years. College fees, vacations, even subscriptions to things I didn't recognize. Streaming services, online shopping clubs, private tutoring apps. There were charges as recent as 2 nights ago. A late-night delivery from a sushi bar that cost more than my weekly groceries. "I'd like to suspend this account completely," I said. Judith nodded. "I can start the process now. We'll need your signature. Would you like to issue a formal notice to any cardholders?" I thought about it. Part of me wanted to let them know they'd been cut off. But another part, the quieter one that had spent decades being overlooked, preferred silence. "No. Let them feel it," I said. "Let them try to swipe at a cafe or gas station and realize they don't own what they thought they did." She didn't flinch, just pushed the paperwork toward me. It took 20 minutes, a handful of signatures, and one final question. "Is there anyone else you trust? Anyone who should have access in case of emergency?" I thought about Julie, my granddaughter, Nathan's middle child. The only one who called just to talk. Who visited even when there was nothing in it for her. Who brought me pumpkin scones on Tuesdays and didn't scroll through her phone while I talked. "Julie Hensley," I said. "Add her as my emergency contact, but no access. Not yet. I want to talk to her first." Judith wrote it down without a word of judgment. By the time I left the bank, the wind had picked up. The streets of Brookridge looked the same as they always had. Quiet, orderly, deceptively peaceful. But something in me had shifted. I felt taller, not younger, no, just more present. At home, I made a sandwich and ate it at the table, not in front of the TV like usual. My coat was finally dry, but I didn't put it away. Let it hang there like a flag. A reminder. Around 3:30, my phone rang again. Amber. I let it ring. No voicemail. 2 minutes later, Nathan. Then, Julie. I answered on the second ring. "Grandma?" Her voice was light but cautious. She always sensed things faster than the others. "Hello, sweetheart. I just got a weird text from Dad. He said the cards aren't working, that there's a problem with the joint account." I could hear traffic behind her. Maybe walking home from school or work. There's no problem, I said. Not anymore. A pause. Did you do something? I let that sit between us. Then I said, Julie, do you remember the time you brought me the basil plant? The little one in the tin pot? She laughed, confused. Yeah, it died in like a week. It wasn't about the plant, I said. It was the thought. You were the only one who brought something without asking for something back. Another silence, but softer this time. Are you okay, Grandma? Yes, better than I've been in a long time. Do you want me to come over? I closed my eyes. There it was. The offer. The difference. Yes, darling. If you have time. I'll bring something sweet. When she arrived 40 minutes later, with a paper bag of pastries and wet hair from the wind, she didn't ask questions right away. Just hugged me like she meant it. Sat at my kitchen table and waited until I was ready to speak. I closed the account, I said finally. The one they all use. I froze it. Julie didn't react the way I expected. No gasp. No defense of her parents. Just a slow, measured nod. They'll be furious. I know. They'll say you're being dramatic, that you misunderstood something, that it wasn't a big deal. I know. She looked at me then. Really looked. But it was a big deal, wasn't it? What happened last night? I didn't answer. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I would have let you in. And that was enough. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. My sleep had been light. Not restless. Just alert. Like my body hadn't quite believed it was allowed to rest now that the wheels had started turning. I lay in bed for a while, listening to the early hush outside. Somewhere down the street, a neighbor's dog barked twice and then fell silent. Rain hadn't returned, but the sky felt heavy again. Just like me. Not broken, but filled with a weight that hadn't yet lifted. Downstairs, I made coffee the old way, with the French press Ed had bought me in 1993. It took longer, but it made me feel grounded. Useful. The folder from the cabinet was still on the kitchen table. I opened it again, this time not just flipping, reading. There it all was, as plain as the ink on the page. Amber's luxury SUV insurance, paid from my account. Monthly contribution to their gym, $220. Summer camp fees for the youngest, $1,800. Streaming services, delivery apps, even their pest control subscription. I paid to keep their aunts away, and they left me standing in the rain. Some of the documents still had sticky notes attached. Little half-hearted, "Thanks, Mom," scribbled in Nathan's handwriting. Back when they still pretended. It wasn't the extravagance that bothered me. It was the erasure. Like I'd become a silent sponsor of a life I wasn't allowed to witness. That morning, I called the lawyer. Francis Grant had been Ed's estate planner and had helped me redo the will after his passing. He was kind, no nonsense, and didn't talk down to me. A rare quality in anyone under 60. "Mrs. Lindell," he said warmly when I asked for a same-day appointment. "We'll make time for you. Come in at noon." At the office, he greeted me with a firm handshake and chamomile tea. His assistant remembered how I liked it. No sugar, just a slice of lemon. I noticed that. I always notice kindness now. We sat in his quiet room with the wide windows, and I told him simply, "It's time to restructure everything." He raised an eyebrow. "Everything?" "Yes," I said. "Accounts, property, trusts, my will." He nodded slowly. "Something happen?" Something finally happened. He didn't press. We started with the basics. I revoked all powers of attorney granted to Nathan or Amber. I'd given them too much for too long, and they'd treated it like their birthright. Frances didn't flinch, just kept writing. Next, I outlined a new trust. One built not for tax efficiency or legacy, but for dignity. I named Julie as sole beneficiary, not because she was perfect or because she asked for anything, but because she never did. I wasn't rewarding her for affection. I was entrusting her with mine. She didn't know it yet. I would tell her when I was ready. "And the house?" Frances asked. I paused. The house was fully mine, paid off decades ago, but Nathan had always referred to it as the family home, and Amber once joked at a barbecue that they'd flip it someday when I moved out. I looked out the window. "I want it protected," I said. "It goes to no one unless I say so in writing. No automatic inheritance. No claim." Frances took notes in a clean, efficient hand. "I can draft it today," he said. "You can sign when you're ready." "I'm ready now." It was quiet for a long moment. "Mrs. Lindell," he said, looking over his glasses. "May I say something?" I nodded. I've worked with hundreds of families, and I've seen what it looks like when people act out of anger. Rash decisions, quick revenge. This isn't that. You're clear, measured. "I've had a long time to watch them forget who I am," I said. "Now I'm just reminding them." He smiled faintly. "You're not the first mother I've seen do this, but you're the calmest." "Because I'm not punishing," I said. "I'm protecting what little I still have left of myself." When I got home from Frances's office, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't slam doors or dance in the living room like women do in movies when they finally take their power back. I just hung my coat, made soup, and sat down in my favorite chair with the quiet kind of stillness that follows hard decisions. The wind outside picked up again. A loose shutter on the side of the house clattered against the wall. Ed had always meant to fix it. I used to remind him about little things like that. Now I reminded no one. The phone was oddly silent that afternoon. No missed calls, no buzzing apologies. Just the empty kind of quiet that told me they still didn't understand what had happened. They thought it was a blip, a technical error, a frozen account, or a confused old woman with a banking app she didn't understand. They didn't know that by lunchtime the trust was signed, the will updated, and every bridge they'd quietly burned behind my back had been made visible. I didn't feel cruel. I felt free. Around 6 p.m., Julie texted. Julie. "They're freaking out." Me. "About what, dear?" Julie. "Cards still don't work. Dad yelled at the bank guy." Amber's blaming the credit union. They're calling it a glitch. I sipped my tea. Me. "Some glitches are made on purpose." She sent back a pause, just 3 dots, then a single message. Julie. "Good." That night, I took out the folder again. Not the financial one, but the one with photos. Real photos. The kind that came from drugstores, not clouds. Nathan as a boy, missing a front tooth. Me in a worn coat, holding him at the zoo. Ed beside me, hair wild from the wind, his arm around my waist like we were still newlyweds. I'd always thought the past was what gave me value, the proof of what I'd given. But that was the lie. The real power wasn't in the memory. It was in the choice to stop giving. The doorbell rang just after 8. I knew before I opened it who it was. Nathan stood on the porch, rain dripping from his collar. Behind him, Amber sat in the passenger seat of their car, arms crossed. Her silhouette in the window looked exactly like I expected. Not cold, just inconvenienced. "Mom," he said, shifting his weight. "Evening." He looked thinner, or maybe just smaller. "Something's wrong with the accounts," he began. "We can't get into the joint funds. The cards are dead. Did something happen?" "Nothing happened," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I did it." "You shut everything down?" "I did." He blinked, wet lashes sticking together. "Why?" I could have listed 1,000 reasons. Could have handed him a printed spreadsheet and a photo of me soaking wet on his porch from 2 nights ago. Could have reminded him of every unreturned call, every unanswered letter. Instead, I said, "Because I've been invisible long enough." "Mom, you're overreacting. Do you really think I'd stand outside my own family's home, in the rain, at my age, and not notice I'd been erased?" His jaw clenched. Amber didn't know. She knew. They always know. The ones who benefit from silence always know exactly how loud your absence will be. He exhaled, clearly caught between apology and indignation. "We need that money." I smiled, tired but calm. I needed respect. He said nothing. "I have nothing else to give," I added. But that was my mistake, thinking I had to keep giving in order to be loved. He rubbed his face with his hands, the way Ed used to when something hard hit him in the chest. "You're really cutting us off?" "I'm not cutting. I'm stopping the leak." He nodded slowly, not understanding, not yet, but feeling the finality in it. Then he turned and walked back to the car. Amber didn't get out, just watched me through the window like I was an inconvenient stranger. I closed the door, not slammed, just closed. The next morning, I opened the ledger. Not the modern kind, not a spreadsheet or app. A real one. Leather-bound, thick paper, started by Ed back in the 80s, when he still thought we'd run a small antiques business out of the garage. It had become our family record book over the years. I kept it up even after he passed. Quiet habit. No one knew it still existed. I turned to the last third of the book, the pages I'd titled years ago, in my own neat cursive. Support and transfers. Nathan, Amber, family. Line after line, item after item. No drama, just facts. 2011, helped with car loan, $7,000, 2012. Paid for water damage repair, $5,500, 2013. Contributed to Amber's business classes, $12,000, 2015. New boiler for their second home, $4,300, 2017 to 2023. Monthly contributions, varied, $58,000, 2020. Private tutoring for Dylan, the middle one, $9,600, 2021. Assisted with IVF attempt, Amber's sister, $6,000, 2022. Down payment on family vacation home, split 3 ways. $38,000. Some items even I had forgotten. Others made me laugh bitterly. A designer stroller, a second refrigerator for entertaining, a couple's retreat in Sedona. Love made me generous. Hope made me blind. It wasn't the total, though that number was ugly. It was the pattern. They asked, I gave. They failed to follow up, I said nothing. They forgot, I remembered. And over the years, that equation hardened into their expectation. And now, when I'd finally stopped, even without yelling, even without cruelty, I was suddenly selfish. There was a knock on the door around noon, not the sharp, entitled kind, but a soft rhythm like a question. I knew before I opened it. Julie stood there, holding a plastic container wrapped in a tea towel. "Soup," she said. "Not from a can." I smiled. "Then come in before it gets cold." We sat at the table and she watched me in that quiet way she always did, letting me decide when to speak. "I went through everything," I said after a while. "All the numbers, All the things I paid for without really realizing how much. Julie nodded. It's a lot, isn't it? Not just the money, the energy, the silence. She didn't look away. They never asked how I was doing, I continued. They only asked what I could do for them. That's not love, she said quietly. No. But it's what I accepted instead of it. We ate soup in silence for a few minutes. The broth was light, with parsley and little bits of chicken, the kind Ed used to like when he had a cold. She'd remembered. I need to ask you something, I said finally. Julie looked up. I made changes to the accounts, legal ones. I'm naming you the sole trustee when the time comes. Her spoon froze halfway to her mouth. Me? Yes. Grandma, I don't know anything about trusts or money. You know about people, I said. That's more than enough. She put the spoon down. I don't want it because of what they did, she said. I don't want to benefit from how they treated you. You're not, I said. You're not benefiting. You're continuing. I'm choosing someone who sees me, not someone who only sees what I can offer. She blinked quickly, looking away toward the window. I'm sorry they don't. It's not your apology to make. Still, I saw the weight in her shoulders. She carried the cracks of this family like I used to. I'm not asking you to fix anything, I said gently. I'm just asking you to be the one who remembers I was here, that I wasn't just a faucet they turned on when they were thirsty. Julie nodded. I already do. Julie stayed until the afternoon sun dipped low enough to cast long gold lines across the linoleum floor. We didn't talk much after the soup, just sat. Sometimes that's the only kindness left between two people who've both lived too long in silence, sharing a room without forcing words into it. When she stood to leave, she hugged me tighter than usual. Not out of pity. I could feel the difference. It wasn't a poor grandma hug. It was a we're in this together kind of hug. I didn't know I'd needed it until she gave it. I'll call you tonight, she said, pulling on her coat. No rush, darling. I know how busy life gets. Julie paused with her hand on the doorknob. You always say that, she said. But it's not fair. You shouldn't be the one who always understands when other people forget. I didn't answer. I just looked at her, and she understood. After she left, I let myself settle into the quiet again. My bones ached. Not from the cold, not from age, from memory. From the weight of things I'd never said, years I'd swallowed instead of speaking. That night, around 8:30, the phone rang again. Amber. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, a text came through. Amber, we need to talk. This has gone too far. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Too far. That's always what people say when you finally say no. Not when they ask too much. Not when they cross a line. Only when you draw one. I turned off the phone and placed it upside down on the kitchen table. Let her wait. The next day, a letter came. A real one, in a white envelope, addressed in Nathan's handwriting. Sloppy. Rushed. He must have written it late, when his calls failed and his pride wouldn't let him try again. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No dear mom. No salutation. I don't know what's going on, but you're hurting the whole family. The kids are confused. Amber is furious. We depended on that support. You could have at least warned us. We'll get through this, but I just want you to know what you've done. Nathan. No apology. No reflection. Just accusation wrapped in disappointment, like I'd stolen something from them. I folded the letter back up and slid it into the notebook. let it live there, among the rest of the evidence. They were panicking. That much was clear. The easy life was unraveling. The invisible scaffolding I'd held up for years was gone. They'd mistaken my silence for permission, my giving for weakness. And now the money had stopped. The calls had started. That evening, Julie texted again. Julie, Dad's blaming you for everything, says you're being cruel, that you're trying to tear the family apart. I replied slowly, carefully. Me. The family was already apart. I just stopped pretending otherwise. She didn't answer right away. 10 minutes later, a simple response. Julie, he's afraid. That's what this is. Fear dressed up as anger. She was right. Nathan wasn't angry, I'd said no. He was terrified, I'd meant it. And I did. The funny thing about cutting people off, really cutting them off, is how quickly they go from entitled to offended to suddenly desperate, like they're discovering gravity for the first time, like it's some cruel new concept that life could move without their comfort being the center of it. By the end of that week, the messages changed tone. Gone was the coldness of, "You've gone too far." In came the pleading. Nathan, "Mom, can we please just sit down and talk? One real conversation. That's all I'm asking." Amber, "You've made your point. Now can we fix this like adults?" Nathan, again, "The kids are asking why you're mad. They miss you. The last one almost got me. Almost. Because that's how it works. They reach for your softest spot and press it. The children, the memories, the promise of closeness, even if they never delivered on it before. But I knew better now. It's not real closeness if it only comes when the credit cards stop working." I didn't answer. They tried a different angle after that. Amber, "We're not perfect. No family is. But this public punishment is humiliating. The neighbors are asking questions." There it was. Not, "How could we hurt you?" Not, "We're sorry for how we treated you." Just, "You're making us look bad." That's the part no one ever wants to admit about some people. They'll treat you like a footstool for years, then call you cruel for standing up. I was done kneeling. On Friday morning, I received a letter from their mortgage company. They'd missed 2 payments. Not long enough to be serious yet, but enough to trigger penalties. The irony made me snort into my tea. How fast it all unravels when the invisible hand disappears. It had only been 6 days, and still, they hadn't come by. Not really. Not to see me. Not to look me in the eye. Just texts. Emails. A note slipped through the door by Dylan, who couldn't meet my gaze as he handed it over. It read, "Grandma, Mom says you're upset. I don't know what happened, but I hope you feel better soon. Love, D." I stared at that shaky teenage handwriting and felt the sharp stab of guilt. The one I'd always obeyed. The guilt that made me say yes, even when I wanted to say no. The guilt that wrote the checks. But guilt can't live long in truth. And the truth was, I hadn't changed. I was still the same woman who baked birthday cakes, who paid for braces, who kept spare gloves in every drawer just in case the kids came by without theirs. The only difference was, I'd stopped offering myself up like an open wallet. That wasn't cruelty. That was correction. Julie visited again that afternoon, this time with a pie she'd made herself, peach and cinnamon. It was still warm. "I heard from Dylan," she said, as we sat by the window. "He's confused. He misses you." "I miss him too," I said. "But missing someone doesn't mean you undo the lesson." Julie nodded, slowly. She was learning how to carry 2 truths at once, just like I had to. Love and boundary. kindness, and consequence. "You think they'll ever get it?" she asked. I looked outside. The leaves were beginning to turn. That time of year where everything changes in silence. "I think they'll understand just enough to be sorry for the money," I said. "Not enough to be sorry for the years." Julie didn't argue. She just passed me the pie server and said, "Still warm. Don't let it cool down." So we ate. Two women in a quiet kitchen. One with years behind her, one just starting out. Both finally learning what love should feel like when it's not being purchased. I didn't answer their calls that weekend. Let them sit with the silence. I'd sat in it long enough. I didn't hear from them at all on Sunday. Not a call, not a message, not even one of those half-hearted emojis Nathan sometimes sent when he wanted to pretend everything was fine without saying anything at all. For once, the silence wasn't mine, and I noticed how heavy it was on their end, how loud. People always assume the one who goes quiet is the one losing, but that's only true if the silence is empty. Mine was full. I filled it with small, deliberate things. Cleaned out the drawers in the hallway. Donated 4 coats I hadn't worn since Ed was alive. Reread old letters. Sewed a button back on the cardigan I always wore when the furnace clicked too slowly in the morning. In the past, I would have spent that Sunday wondering if Nathan was okay, if the kids were upset, if Amber was still angry. I would have gone to bed with that anxious knot just under my ribs, the one that says, "Fix it, fix it, fix it." But not anymore. I didn't owe them comfort for a discomfort they'd caused. By Monday, the pressure started again. This time from Nathan's older brother, my other son, Joel. He hadn't been part of any of it, not really. He lived 3 towns over with his husband in their quiet garden. He called now and then, remembered birthdays, sent postcards from trips I hadn't paid for. We weren't close, but we were fine. So when he called that morning, I knew what it was before I picked up. "Hey, Mom." "Hello, Joel." A pause. Then, I got a call from Nathan. "Of course you did. He says you froze all the accounts, that you've cut them off." I prefer the term corrected the imbalance. Joel sighed. "I'm not taking sides." "Good," I said, "because this isn't a fight." "What is it then?" "A reckoning." He was quiet again. Then, carefully, he sounded embarrassed. That made me smile, not unkindly. Then he's feeling the right thing. Joel exhaled slowly. He says the house might go into foreclosure if they miss another payment. I nodded to myself. It might. "You okay with that?" I looked around my kitchen. My quiet, warm kitchen, with its worn countertops and the scent of cinnamon still clinging to the air from Julie's pie. "I'm finally okay," I said. "That's new." Joel didn't argue. After a moment, he said, "You know, I always wondered why you gave him so much. I didn't want him to feel small. And now? Now I want him to feel truth." Joel didn't say much after that. Just, "I'll check in next week," and "I love you," before hanging up. I sat for a while after that call. Let the echo of it settle. Joel had always kept his distance, not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. He'd seen what Nathan had become and decided not to orbit that kind of gravity. Now, maybe, he was seeing it more clearly. That afternoon, a package arrived. No return label, just my name, carefully written as if by someone who doesn't usually write letters. Inside was a framed photo. The 6 of them, Nathan's family, posing in front of their house last spring. Everyone smiling. Amber holding the youngest. The oldest son throwing a peace sign. Julie off to one side, eyes not quite focused on the camera, There was a note tucked behind the frame. "We didn't mean to push you away. We just didn't think we had to pull you in. Maybe we were wrong." A knot signed with love, not even a real apology. But maybe a crack in the wall. I left the photo in the box, let them sit with the space they'd created. They didn't pull me in, but I'd pulled myself out. He didn't knock, just stood on the porch like a boy who wasn't sure if he was in trouble. Shoulders hunched forward, hands deep in the pockets of a jacket I recognized, the same one Ed used to wear to shovel snow. Funny. I'd given it to Nathan years ago after his father passed. Maybe that's why he wore it now. I opened the door and stepped aside. "Come in," I said. My voice wasn't cold. It was just tired. Nathan entered slowly, like the air inside might scold him. He looked around the living room as if it had changed since he was last here. And maybe it had. Maybe I had. The photos were still there, the same ticking clock on the mantel, the scent of cinnamon and soap. But something was different, and he could feel it. "I didn't want to come empty-handed," he said, holding up a white paper bag. "Coconut macaroons. Your favorite, right?" "They were," I said, not unkindly. "Sit down." He did, on the edge of the chair like he might have to jump up and flee. I didn't make tea. I didn't bring out plates. I let the silence settle. Nathan cleared his throat. "I know things have gotten complicated." "That's a word," I said. He flinched, then nodded. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. The accounts, the house. I never wanted to take advantage." "But you did." He winced. "I didn't see it that way," he admitted. "It was just, you always helped. It felt normal." "Normal to take and never ask how I was?" I asked. "Normal to leave me at the gate in the rain?" His face crumpled at that. "I didn't know you were there already," he said low. "I swear, Amber told me you were late." "So you let that be true?" "Because it was easier." He looked down at his hands, picked at a hangnail like he was 5 years old again, caught lying about broken glass. "I'm sorry, Mom." "Are you sorry I was hurt? Or sorry that the money stopped?" His eyes filled. Not with tears, not yet, but with something close to shame. Both. That was honest, but it wasn't enough. I let him sit in it. Let him feel what it meant to be uncomfortable. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because that was the first step to understanding what he'd asked me to live with for years. "Julie told me about the trust," he said after a while. I raised an eyebrow. "She didn't mean to, I guessed. She was talking around it, and I'm not stupid." "No," I said. "You're not. She's a good kid. She is. She loves you." I nodded. "She shows it." Another long pause. "I miss that," he said quietly. "What?" "Your approval. Your steadiness. You made everything feel safe, even when I messed up." "You stopped earning that safety," I said. He nodded. Didn't argue. I looked at him. Really looked. My son. My boy who used to bring me wildflowers and fists of mud. My man who grew into someone who mistook love for access. "I don't hate you," I said. He looked up, startled. "But I no longer owe you comfort," I continued. "You're a grown man, Nathan, with a family of your own, and I won't carry your burdens in silence anymore." "I want to do better," he said quietly. "I know," I said. "But you want the reward for that now, and it doesn't come now." He didn't argue. "I don't know how to fix it," he whispered. "You don't," I said. "You start by not asking me to fix it anymore." We sat in silence after that. It wasn't peace, but it was honest. When he stood to leave, He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for access. He just said, "Thank you for letting me in." I didn't say you're welcome. I just nodded. And that was enough. I watched him walk down the porch steps without turning around. For a moment, just one moment, I saw the boy he used to be. Small shoulders in a coat too big, back hunched not from weather but from guilt. He didn't look back. I didn't expect him to. I closed the door softly and leaned against it, letting the silence settle. Not the tense, hollow kind I used to live in. This was something else. A quiet that belonged to me. My house. My choice. No door was slammed today, but one had most certainly been closed. That evening, I sat in the living room with the lamp on low, flipping through the old ledger again, the one with all the loans and gifts and forgotten favors. I didn't reread every line. I just ran my finger down the dates like a timeline of silence. I wasn't angry anymore. It had taken me longer than I'd like to admit to realize that some love is shaped more like obligation than care, especially when it comes from people who think they're entitled to you. But I had done it. I had stepped out of the role they'd cast for me. They used to think of me as the rock. That's what Amber said once at a dinner, when we were still pretending to be close. "You're the rock, Mildred, the foundation." And I'd smiled. Of course I had. It sounded like a compliment. But do you know what people do to rocks? They walk on them, build on them. Forget they're even there. Julie called just before 9. "I saw him," she said. "I know. He didn't say much, but he looked different. Being told no can do that to a man." She hesitated, then asked, "How did it feel?" "Like turning a key," I said. "Not locking something, unlocking myself." Julie was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'm proud of you." No one had said that to me in years, not since Ed, not since I was more than a function. We didn't talk long. Just enough for me to hear her voice, to let her hear mine. That was enough. After I hung up, I made a cup of tea and stood by the front window. The house across the street had its porch light on. The neighbors, younger couple, 2 kids, were putting up early Halloween decorations. Fake cobwebs, a paper skeleton. I smiled watching them. A normal life. Not built on sacrifice. Not funded by someone's guilt. Just normal. And mine? Mine was finally becoming that too. For the first time in years, no one was waiting on me to fix anything. No one was calling to ask for help. No one was dropping hints or sending passive-aggressive messages. The phone was quiet. And I didn't feel abandoned. I felt released. The next morning, I received a single envelope in the mail. No return address, just a plain white envelope. Inside was a small card. On the front, a printed design. Gold leaves. Autumn. Change. Inside, Nathan's handwriting. Smaller this time. Less sure. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything right now, but I hope one day you'll believe me when I say I'm sorry. Not for the money, for the way we made you feel unnecessary. You weren't. You never were. Love, Nathan." There was no check inside, no request, no promise. Just a single, handwritten apology. Late, but honest. I folded it gently and placed it next to the photo of Ed on the mantel. He would have smiled, I think, and said, "About damn time." It wasn't dramatic what happened next. No shouting, no scenes, no tearful visits at the door. Just a slow unraveling. The quiet kind that only comes when a truth has been told and no one's quite sure what to do with it. Julie told me the house was listed for sale a week later. Not publicly, not yet, but she saw the real estate documents on the counter when she visited. Amber hadn't said a word about it, just kept moving dishes around, pretending it wasn't real. Nathan, she said, looked hollow, like he hadn't slept in days. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile or whisper serves you right into my tea. That wasn't what this was. I'd lived too long to enjoy someone else's downfall, especially when I'd spent years trying to prevent it. But I also didn't flinch. They were losing the house. The one I helped them buy. The one they'd grown comfortable in while I paid the taxes, the insurance, even the overdue fees they never noticed. Now they noticed. Julie didn't bring it up to guilt me. I knew that. She told me because she believed I had the right to know what was falling apart. And I did. "I don't think they've told the kids yet," she said quietly. "Dylan asked me why Mom's been tense all week. I didn't know what to say." "You're not responsible for explaining their decisions," I told her. She nodded, but I saw the weight of it in her eyes. She was carrying pieces that didn't belong to her, like I used to. I wanted to take them from her, wanted to wrap her in the kind of protection I never got. But instead, I gave her the thing I'd only just learned to give myself: permission to not fix it. "If they ask," I said, "tell them the truth. Tell them the support stopped. That's all." Julie frowned. "They'll think it's mean." "Let them," I said. "Let them learn what happens when you treat generosity as entitlement." It didn't feel cruel. It felt clear. That weekend, I passed them at the grocery store. Amber was in the self-checkout line with two of the kids. She saw me first, eyes widening for half a second before she turned quickly, pretending to study a bag of frozen peas like it contained the meaning of life. I didn't wave. Didn't hide. I walked past, tall and unbothered, and bought my own groceries with my own card, the one no one else had access to anymore. Outside, I sat in the car a minute before starting the engine. It wasn't pride I felt. It was peace. Amber could pretend I was invisible. But I knew now. I'd never been invisible. I'd been ignored. And those are two very different things. You ignore someone you believe will never leave. Never stop. Never say enough. But I had. And now they had to learn how to live without what they never even said thank you for. Julie came by again on Sunday. She brought muffins and a new scarf she'd knitted for me. Soft gray, the kind of color I always said felt like early morning. We sat on the porch with our mugs, listening to the wind move through the trees. "They might have to move before winter," she said, "if the sale goes through." I nodded. "That'll be hard." "For the kids, yeah." "I know." Julie was quiet for a while, then asked, "Do you regret it?" "No," I said, without hesitation. "They think you do." "I know." She turned to me, eyes soft. "And if they come to you with nothing?" No pretense. No demands, just people trying to reconnect. "Then we talk," I said. "But not until then, not a second before." Julie reached out, squeezed my hand. "They don't deserve you," she whispered. I smiled. They didn't have to deserve me. They just had to see me. That was the tragedy. And now, maybe, the lesson. By mid-November, the leaves had given up. They blew across the sidewalks in frantic little spirals, collecting in gutters, under porch steps, in the corners of mailboxes. I watched them from my window every morning with a kind of quiet understanding. Not sadness, just recognition. Everything falls eventually, even what once held on so tightly. The for sale sign went up the week before Thanksgiving. Not a subtle one. Big, red-lettered, with the realtor's name and a smiling photo of a man who looked too polished to understand what losing a home really meant. Julie texted me a picture of it. Julie, it's real now. Me, it was always real. What wasn't real was the illusion, the one they'd build on the back of my silence. The false safety of thinking I would always be there to catch them, clean up after them, carry the load so they could pretend it wasn't heavy. Now, the weight was theirs. And mine? Mine was lighter than it had been in decades. I hadn't spoken to Nathan since he sat in my living room. I hadn't seen Amber since the grocery store. But the absence didn't ache like I thought it would. It just was. A new kind of normal. I kept busy in small ways. I started baking again. Real baking, not just frozen dough warmed for company. I rearranged the living room furniture. I even went to a local book club at the library, something Ed had always encouraged, and I'd always been too needed to try. At the third meeting, a woman named Eleanor asked if I was new to town. No, I said, smiling. Just finally present. She didn't ask what I meant. She didn't have to. Julie came over that weekend with a thermos of cider and an old jigsaw puzzle we used to do when she was little. Guess what? She said, kicking off her boots. Dylan finally knows. About the house? She nodded. He overheard them arguing. Amber was blaming Nathan. Nathan was blaming everyone else. He asked me if it was true you took everything away. And what did you say? I said you took yourself back. That hit harder than I expected. I blinked once, then smiled. He said he misses you, Julie added, but he doesn't know how to say it. He's young, I said. He'll learn, or he won't. Either way, I'm not chasing that kind of love anymore. We sat in the soft light of the afternoon and pieced together the puzzle. Ed's old jazz records played low in the background. We didn't rush it. Some afternoons don't need a goal, just a rhythm. At one point, Julie looked up and said, "You're different now." How so? Quieter, but stronger. I thought about that. I used to think strength was what you give, I said. Now I know it's what you keep. She nodded. She understood. Outside, a gust of wind knocked a few more leaves loose from the tree out front. They scattered across the yard like confetti from a party no one remembered starting. I didn't chase them. I just watched. They moved out on a Thursday. No announcement, no farewell visit, no offer to stop by for tea. One last time. Just a quiet truck in the driveway and cardboard boxes stacked against the porch railing, like ruins of a life too heavy to carry intact. Julie told me. She saw it on her way to work. I didn't drive by, didn't look at photos, didn't ask who bought the house or where they were going next. Some endings don't need a witness, just closure. For years, I'd pictured this moment. Not the move itself, but the shift, the change in orbit, the point where I was no longer the silent support beam of someone else's comfort. I used to imagine it might feel vindicating, even sweet. But standing in my kitchen that morning, pouring coffee into the same mug I'd used every day for a decade, I didn't feel any of that. I just felt calm. Like a chapter had ended, and the pen was still in my hand. Not theirs. Mine. That afternoon, I opened the notebook again. The one where I'd written, in those early, stunned hours, "They left me in the rain. I will not forget." Below that, the lines had grown, itemized, detailed, half record, half reckoning. But now, I turned the page and started a new one. This is what I reclaimed. I listed it plainly, not like a poem, not like a letter. Just truths. My time, my voice, my privacy, my money, my peace, My name not as a bank, but as a person. My right to say enough without explanation. My seat at my own table, I didn't list them out of spite. I listed them so I'd remember that this wasn't destruction. It was restoration. That evening, the wind picked up again. Leaves tapping the window, like the world itself was knocking gently, reminding me to keep going. I made a small dinner and sat by the fireplace with Julie's scarf wrapped around my shoulders. It still smelled faintly of her shampoo. Lavender, and something soft I couldn't name. I read a book I'd been meaning to start for years, and I didn't think about Nathan. Not in anger, not in longing. Just not at all. It wasn't that I didn't love him. Of course I did. But love doesn't mean handing someone the knife and then apologizing when they cut you with it. It had taken me 78 years to understand that. I didn't blame him for everything. I blamed myself for not drawing the line sooner, but I forgave that too. Not because I needed to forget, but because I needed to stop carrying the parts of myself that had been shaped by someone else's disregard. That's the thing no one tells you about getting older. It's not the body that betrays you first. It's the belief that being useful is the only way to be loved. I was done being useful. I was ready to simply be. The next morning, a letter arrived. From Julie. Not a text. Not an email. A letter. In her neat, slanted handwriting. Grandma, I've been thinking about everything you've done. Not just these past weeks, but for all of us, all these years. And I realized something. You didn't just stop giving. You started teaching. You're the first woman in our family to say, "This is where I stop." And I think you changed all of us by doing it. You've made me brave. You've made me aware. And if I ever become a mother, I hope I raise my kids with the clarity you found for yourself. Thank you for not going quiet. Thank you for not disappearing. I love you. Julie. I read it 3 times, and then I cried. Not from sadness, but from recognition. Someone saw me, really saw me, not as the provider, not as the fixer, not as the one who shows up with casserole and cash, just me, Mildred, woman, mother, grandmother, person. I folded the letter and placed it inside the notebook, the new page, the one where I'd begun again, and in the margin I wrote, I was never lost. I was just finally found by myself. I didn't go to the farewell dinner they eventually arranged. It came 2 weeks after they moved. An invitation, half formal, sent via group text. A small gathering, they wrote. To reconnect, no pressure. It was held at a cousin's place, someone neutral, someone distant enough not to know the details but close enough to lend a living room. Julie went. Later, she told me how awkward it was, how Amber smiled too much and Nathan barely spoke, how everyone acted like nothing had really happened, just a rough patch, like it wasn't years of quiet neglect, a lifetime of taking dressed up as family. They don't get it, Julie said, sitting at my table the next day, wrapping her hands around a mug of cocoa like she needed to anchor herself. They think you're just going through something, like you'll soften. I have softened, I said, just not toward them. And that was the truth. Not all hard things make you hard in return. Some of them make you clear. I wasn't bitter. I was precise. Not vengeful, just awake. My days looked different now. I joined a walking group for older women. We didn't move fast, but we laughed. I planted herbs in the back garden again, learned the names of the birds that came to the feeder, bought new pillows for the couch, soft, deep green ones that matched nothing and pleased only me. I stopped picking up the phone every time it rang. I stopped reading messages twice, just to be sure I wasn't missing something I was supposed to feel guilty about. And I stopped explaining my silence, because I owed no one that anymore. Julie came by every Sunday, sometimes for lunch, sometimes just to sit and read. She never expected, never asked, just came. One morning, she brought me a small gift, a pendant on a chain shaped like a key. "What's this?" I asked, holding it up to the light. She smiled. "A reminder that the door you closed stayed closed." I wore it that day, and the day after. I wear it still. They tried, now and then. A text on holidays. A card signed by the kids, but clearly written by Amber. A voicemail that started, "I know things have been strained," and ended with a long pause that sounded like disappointment. But I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, because I was finally honest. The truth is, they taught me how to disappear. They just never expected I'd learn so well. I still love them in the way you love a story you've finished reading, grateful for what it taught you, but not willing to reread it just because someone else never noticed how it ended. And now? Now I am not waiting in the rain. Now I am not begging to be let in. Now I am not funding my own erasure and calling it motherhood. Now I am here, at home, in myself, in peace. If you've read this far, maybe you see yourself in parts of it. Maybe you've given too much, said yes too often, stayed too long at the table when your name wasn't even spoken. Let me tell you, it's not too late to stand up. You don't need permission to protect your peace. You don't need a reason to reclaim your name. And if you've been waiting for a sign, this is it. Subscribe if you know what this silence is about. Leave a comment if you left too. Not because you stopped loving, but because you stopped disappearing.